Okay, well, it's lovely to see you, Dr. Mark Pettigrew.
Thank you. Nice to see you too.
Thank you for joining us on the
Hi, Mark.
YDLMF podcast.
Very, very welcome.
Right, well, let's kick off. We're here because of this.
Yeah.
Yay! And I've started to get my teeth into it. And firstly, I'll start by asking you, how come you got involved in this project?
In terms of the book, I know Mark Austin, and he was very good friends with Des, and well, we both knew Des, and I knew that Mark had all these materials that had been collected over the years. I mean, shelves and shelves of correspondence from Des, and I think he wanted to put some, because Des always wanted to have his diaries published, and the Home Office refused. And to be honest, quite rightly so at the time, because this version, I have to give credit to Mark, because it must have taken him hours and hours to put this together, because Des didn't write chronologically. He would sit down and write about a particular topic. So to go through all of that is a massive task for Mark. And also the original is extremely graphic. And there are pieces in there that you just couldn't publish.
Well, that's interesting. It is I find it still quite graphic, the bits that I read.
But the actual originals are very, very graphic. Not just what happened with his victims, but dreams he had, recollections of his own sexual abuse, growing up as childhood fantasies. There is some stuff that just the Obscene Publications Act, I think would have the flying squad knocking on the door saying, you can't publish this. So I have to give all credit to Mark for putting this together. And like I say, I know him, and I was just happy to help him out with it. For my very, very small part.
What was in your mind at that time? What did you feel that it would run through? Why it was appropriate now to publish this when quite clearly it wasn't during his lifetime?
I think I don't know if Mark had actually planned to do this, knowing that the ITV were going to do a drama about Des. When I sat down to write the foreword, to be honest, because I knew Des for so long, it really didn't take me very long to do it all. It was just basically all after years of researching with him and knowing him, it just kind of wrote itself, to be honest.
I didn't know you knew him.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I knew
when you ask in the last bit that about a definitive answer as to why he became one of Britain's is everyone still there? Why he became one of Britain's most infamous serial killers, and that if there's an answer, it'll be found here. Did you ever have an inkling or a bigger idea than that yourself?
I think Des would say that it was a mixture of factors that came to make him and who he was. Growing up at the time he did, when being gay was not only socially disapproved of, it was actually illegal. He recalled sexual abuse from his grandfather. He had strained relationship with other members of his family. His homosexuality forced him to isolate a lot as he went into the army, the police, and those machismo environments. And he turned to drink. Drink was a big part of forming him. And so I agree with Des in as much as if you asked him, why did you do this? He would take responsibility for the harm it caused in terms of the victims and their families. But he would almost say that, well, this is how life has made me. This is how I've turned out because of these characteristics of being gay, the specific time frame, the sexual abuse, and so on. So in that sense, it's a bit of an absolution of responsibility, saying, well, all these things happened to me and this is the result.
Do you think there is anything in this, Mark, that the families of his victims can draw any comfort from?
No, I really don't. I would really hope that the victims and the families of the victims, I would actually hope that they didn't read it, to be quite honest. I think it's just too upsetting. And like with that explanation in mind, that almost that Des the serial killer was formed by life. If I was a victim's family member or loved one, I would think, well, that's a bit of a cop out. And to be honest, it probably is. But I would hope that they don't read this. I really would.
Why?
I think it would just be too upsetting for them, and nobody wants to think of their loved one being treated like a piece of meat.
Yeah.
It's interesting because Des was a very specific type of necrophile. He was what we call a necrofetishist. So he didn't just enjoy sex with corpses. He enjoyed being around them. So he would bathe with them, watch them, eat with them, converse with them. He would form a relationship with them. As mad as that sounds. So he would genuinely believe he was in a relationship with these men for the limited amount of time that he had with them, because obviously once they start to decompose, they can't fulfill their role in his necrophilic fantasy anymore. But what is interesting, the first victim he burned as a whole on a bonfire where he lived, and that was successful. It didn't arouse anybody's suspicions. No neighbors, were wondering, what's going on here. And it's very interesting because even though it was successful, he changed his pathway of body disposal with later victims. He didn't need to start dismembering them and eviscerating them. He didn't need to do that because he'd already proved that he could successfully dispose of a body as a whole without arousing anybody's suspicion. So it's very interesting that after the first victim, he started dismembering them, which my reading is that's ending the relationship on his own terms, because they've let him down again and he's gone back to being socially isolated and alone. And so they change from his partners and his boyfriends, and in the end, they're just another person that has rejected them, and therefore they according to him, deserve that treatment. And that's why I think he changed from disposing bodies as a whole to dismembering them.
When you say that he felt he had been rejected, I mean, anybody would say, well, hold on, of course they rejected you because they were just corpses because you'd killed them.
But it was his fantasy. He was in a relationship with them, so it wasn't just sex. Like I say, he would converse with them, he would dress them, undress them, bathe with them, he would sleep in the same bed as them. And he would mimic all these relationship behaviors for as long as the fantasy could be sustained, for as long as decay and could be retarded and kept at bay. But once decay is set in, you can't keep that fantasy going.
I mean, when we talk about that and hear what you're saying and hear, this is what he has described, I mean, do you think he was insane?
No, I don't. He wasn't. He knew what he was doing, and you have to. There isn't a pattern of insanity about his actions. He's actually very methodical in terms of how he disposed of victims and how he evaded detection for so long. And I know we're talking about a different time here, but when police were called, there was a time when police were standing on floorboards that had bodies underneath them, and Des managed to convince them that it was just a lover's tiff, and that's all it was. And so, no, I don't think you can do that and those actions and be certified insane.
Yeah.
Watching Des, the ITV drama, he didn't come across as very nice. I mean, I know aside from the murders that he committed, he's quite an interesting person. How do you reconcile the person that you knew with the acts that he did? And did you like him?
Well, I have to hold my hands up. I haven't actually seen Des, the ITV show. I don't ever watch these recreations or these dramas of people I knew or who I've worked with or researched with, or any of these true crime documentaries. I don't tend to watch them. So I can only say that Des as a person he was very interested in politics, current events. He would always send me clippings from the Times of articles that he thought I might be interested in. He had an old school sense of humor, so he loved a joke about, you know, Irishmen and Scotsmen. And I don't think he ever heard a mother-in-law joke that he didn't like, that he didn't enjoy. So it's very removed, because I didn't know him at the time. Obviously, he was committing these offences. I only knew him afterwards. It's weird because it's my job. I can sort of disconnect the two, the person that I know, and then an analysis of what they've done. And what people don't, people have this misconception of serial killers. They're not men with horns and tails and pitchforks. They have normal lives. They have interests in sport, in politics, things like that. They don't have the mark of the beast about them, and they do everything that we do, but as well as that, you know, they kill.
Yeah.
Yes, Ben. Ben
No, it's true. I mean,
understands.
but no, Mark makes a really good point there. It's what was known, I think, in the aftermath of the Holocaust as the banality of evil, isn't it? It's as you say, it's they're not people who stand out. Well, the vast majority do not stand out. In fact, that's why they get away with it for so long, because they are so average and normal. They just don't. They're not on anybody's radar.
No, I mean, if you think of like Harold Shipman, this respectable doctor that was people's friend and confidant, and nobody had a clue, because he was, you know, he had this other persona. What would say is fractured identity. So people can't see the fracture, but that's what's hidden from view, and so they can go about their daily lives and do all the normal things that we do. They can hold down jobs. They can even hold down marriages, if you think of Peter Sutcliffe. But then they have this other side to them, where they are doing these awful crimes.
And can I ask you about your background and how you came to be involved in the line of work that you do? I mean, it's not your average, you know, what do people say if they meet you in the pub when you tell them what you do?
I can't remember the last time I went to the pub.
Neither can we.
Yeah, what
like pub though? We have a pub here.
I'm trying to put some meaning to that phrase. Well, I did my PhD about death row and capital punishment in America, and after I finished that, I started researching the most serious sentence we have here, which is life without parole. And the genesis of life without parole was the Moors murders, particularly Myra Hindley and her case. So after a while, I started thinking, well, what's the point in examining the policy of life without parole or capital punishment without looking at the actions that give rise to it? What are we saying that is so bad that you have to be put to death, or you have to remain in prison for your natural life? And that's how I sort of got into, because the majority of people that have whole life terms in this country are people who have killed multiple times. And so it just happened like that, really.
Ben, are you still with us?
I think his ale's gone. I think his ale's gone a bit too well.
Oh well, I'll sort of get Ben. Are you still with us? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay.
I lost you for a bit, but now I'm back.
Good.
I just sit here nodding sagely if you lose me, so that I think in case you get me back, you're not going to realise that I got bumped off. I think the internet where I am isn't great, so apologies for that, everybody.
Well, maybe you can wind it up a bit. This is fine by me, Mark, because I can just carry on asking you questions. I've got so many questions. I'm actually really enjoying the book.
Right.
In a sort of, I mean, obviously in inverted commas, really, because I'm finding that it gives me some kind of idea about him, which I didn't think it would.
No, I mean, these are his words. I mean, you're not going to get to know somebody better. I mean, sure, meeting them and talking to them, but you're not going to know somebody better than through their own writing and how they, in retrospect, think of what they've done and why they did it and the ramifications of it. And it's important to note that it's not just actually about the the offences, the murders that he committed. It's also about before his childhood and also afterwards, and his life in prison, which I think a lot of people kind of, usually when you have these true crime documentaries and books and so on, they just cover the actual offences and then you don't really hear that much about them, whereas this is quite detailed in terms of his life in prison, because he was in prison for well, near 40 years, I think, maybe 35 to 40 years, and so that's a big chunk of his life which is dealt with here.
Ben, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
It's kind of weird asking someone if they're with us, isn't it? In a serial killer context.
Are you out there?
It's like a seance. Yeah.
I don't want you in my seances.
Tap once for yes and twice for piss off.
I'll let you have a question now. Do you want one?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, you know, as you said, that Mark Austin had gone through all this stuff. I mean, did you kind of, what sort of filters were applied? I mean, obviously there's the filter of taste and decency, but I mean, you know, I think one from somebody, from the point of view of somebody who obviously hasn't read the book yet, it's like, okay, well, I can see that there will be some people who say that we shouldn't necessarily just, you know, give this person a platform to just, you know, spout whatever they want to say. So what sort of filters and what sort of analysis did you or did Mark put in before choosing what went in and what was left out, more importantly?
I should say that this is Mark is not going to make anything off this. All the proceeds from this book will go to victims' charity. So it's, you know, to answer that question, nobody is profiting from this. I can't speak for Mark. The only thing I know is, like I said, because there's wrote in chunks and at different points of his imprisonment, he reflected on different parts, sometimes more than once. And so I can only assume that Mark took a lot out that was repetition. And as you say, the standards of taste and decency when things were just too explicit.
Mark, aside from, I'll call him Dennis Nilsen, if that's just to, yeah. What other big name criminals have fascinated you? I don't want to say it about anybody that I've worked with who's still with us. But I have. I suppose because this might segue into it, the Moors murders. And I spoke with Ian Brady via correspondence, but I never went to see him because I didn't particularly need to. But yeah, I think the Moors murders case was probably the gateway into this. And I mean, it's still fascinating today because that dynamic between Brady and Hindley, and I've gone through Hindley's prison records and her diaries and so on. But still, the dynamic between them is still quite mysterious, and there's still that lingering doubt in everyone's mind. Was she controlling him in some parts of the crimes or with certain victims? And so, yeah, I think that's probably the case that fascinated me the most. Because of her involvement specifically?
I think it was like I said, because I've read her diaries and her letters and so on, and you get to sort of understand the character of somebody. And either, you know, she was duped, or she was either, well, perhaps very manipulative, and there are all these contradictions about her which remain unresolved, and obviously we'll never know now. And I think that's why, if they'd have just been hanged, not because the death penalty was abolished while they were on remand, if they would have just been hanged, they would have been a footnote in history, and you or I and most other people would never even heard of them. So again, it's the first big case after the abolition of the death penalty, and of course I'm in Manchester here, so it's local to me. But yeah, that's still the fascinating one, I think.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, you know, it is a crime that still somehow casts its shadow. Certainly, I mean, you know, that area of Manchester, I've never lived there, but I know it. And, you know, you look up and you see Saddleworth Moor from most parts of Manchester, if you're high enough. You know, you can see it there. And it's easy to imagine how back in, 1966 or whatever, you know, this was something that was at that point perhaps people just hadn't heard of that kind of thing before. They weren't
No.
they weren't familiar with you. I mean, nowadays, we kind of, we see lots of documentaries about serial killers. Media and mass media and mass communication means that we hear a lot more about these types of crimes, and of course they're detected as well in a way that perhaps they weren't before. But yeah, at that time it must have been so completely outside everybody's experience that it's little wonder that it casts such a shadow over,
especially
an
because a
entire
woman was
population.
involved. And like
Yeah.
you say, because a woman sexually abusing children, and it being recorded on tape.
Yeah.
It just blew everybody's minds, and I still think now it does, because Myra Hindley is still the epitome in this country of female evil, if you like. I mean, Rose West did far worse things if you put these things on a scale. I mean, truly horrific. But it's still Myra Hindley that sticks out in everybody's mind, and there's that infamous mugshot, and so people, it's emblazoned on everybody's brain. I think that mugshot, and then obviously everything that goes with what we assume Myra Hindley to have been, all those emotions of evil and a woman doing these things to children. It's unnatural from the outside looking in.
Yeah, I mean, well, you mentioned the mugshot there, Mark, and I think you're absolutely hitting the nail on the head. It's that era. There was such limited, communication available that one mugshot would dominate every front page. And as soon as you give it the tag, the Moors murders, the alliterative, immediacy of that, it just tells you exactly what you need to know. And there are children involved. This is a man and a woman. I suppose that might have resonance with Bonnie and Clyde in a way. And you have this murderous couple. You have them as lovers. You have them as scandalous. You have them as the images that sort of like, in a weird way, when you only have one image and it's in black and white, it's somehow all the more resonant, and it has all the more power for that reason, for its uniqueness.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the actual mugshot was taken about half three in the morning after she'd been quizzed for a number of hours. But it's just something about the composition of that photograph, the shadows under the eyes, and you can see the roots in the hair, and it's a very, very powerful image. And there aren't actually many photographs of Myra Hindley. If I can count, I probably count on one hand the amount of photographs I've actually seen of her. Certainly, not much more than 5 or so. And it's that one that stands out. And if you put that up anywhere, everybody instantly knows who she is, and they recall the story. A very, very powerful image.
And still enormous power in that image, absolutely.
Yeah.
Can I ask what an average day is like in your job? What do you do day by day?
Do you know, a lot of it can be quite boring. Which,
I'm gonna cut that bit out.
You can cut that. But if I'm writing a paper for a journal, or I'm writing a speech for a conference, it's very analytical, looking at these things and what's happened. There's nothing salacious about it. You just, because you're viewing it so objectively, and you sort of categorize people and their behaviors. I'm not out investigating serial killers. I'm not treating them. I'm literally just assessing and analyzing and examining the psychology behind their actions. And so it's very analytical. It's not that exciting, I'm afraid to say.
Does it affect the way that you look at life after years of doing that?
No. There's only two things that I can't even read about in the news. So anything that's about cruelty to animals, if I'm clicking through the paper and I see a story about that, I can't look at it. And anything about cruelty to elderly people, you see these horrible documentaries and what goes on in care homes. I couldn't watch anything like that. In terms of, but that's about it. To be honest, everything else I can look at with an analytical eye, and it doesn't really affect me.
So if we pick up on that, Mark, and go back to Dennis Nilsen, with your analytical sort of hat on, and you've talked about how he was abused, how he struggled to form relationships and felt very lonely, and all the rest of it. mean, is there anything that could have happened differently that would have stopped him becoming a serial killer?
If he had the ability to maintain a lasting relationship in later life with a partner, that could have had a significant impact, because if he had a long-term partner, that would impact other parts of his behavior, like his alcohol consumption, for example. So that could have perhaps changed things, but we'll never know now. So it's all conjecture. But I think if there was one thing, it would be a boyfriend, a husband, a life partner.
Did you feel sorry for him?
No, I didn't feel sorry for him. I think if there's pity to be laid anywhere, it's with the victims and the loved ones. And there are many people that have a bad start in life, that suffer abuse, that feel like they have to stay in the closet with regards to their sexuality and so on. Many people with drink problems, and they don't do what he did. I know it's probably a few people that have all these factors come in at very specific times of their life in a way that mirrors theirs. But no, I don't feel sorry for him. I feel sorry for the victims and their families.
Okay, I mean, I think that's really interesting. Thanks, Mark. I mean, there's lots there. I don't know if you want to ask any more questions, Victoria.
No, I was going to ask you if you work with the police. Are they one of your main?
No. This is the misconception. I always get asked, "Do you work for the police?" No.
Oh, with them. With them, I mean.
I don't work with them or for them. The only other contact I would have with the police is if I go to a conference and present a paper, and then there might be some police officers in the audience that might be there to just attend the conference and just to see what's happening in the world of academics and stuff like that. But I don't have any contact with the police other than that, no.
Okay,
which is a misconception about my day-to-day life.
I don't want to shatter my misconception at all.
I'll just I think I'll leave that there then before I completely disillusion you.
I thought you wore like a Columbo raincoat and had a magnifying glass.
I would love that. I would love that. I think I could really pull off that raincoat look and the cigar.
Well, apparently the money in podcasts is in the merchandising, so we could sell you a kit, perhaps.
Okay.
Who would have thought it ended up this way? Can I also ask you when the release date is?
It's out now.
Oh, I thought it was the 25th.
Oh,
am I wrong?
It's certainly available for pre-order now.
Oh, is it? Okay, great.
I do
because I was wondering how a book launch happens when no one goes out. What happens? I have absolutely
no idea.
Okay, but it's available for pre-order. That's the most important.
You can pre-order it now on all the usual websites.
And I think it must be at some kind of first, because how many books like this are there in existence in the circumstances that you've written forward, and they've been written by the person in question? It's a very unusual book, isn't it?
It is very unusual. The Home Office obviously have a policy that they don't want any prisoner to make money off their crimes. I think there was a trend some years ago about notorious people, selling artwork and stuff like that. So it is very rare to get something like this into the public domain. And I think if I wanted anybody to take anything away from this, it would be to understand the life story of somebody, the before and after the crimes, as well as the crimes themselves. Because like I say, with these kind of TV documentaries and true crime books, if they just focus on the crime, they don't explore the background, they don't explore the ramifications of imprisonment and so on. So I think it's unique in that sense to have this in a book format. Like I said, I haven't seen Des, so I don't know if they did anything about his childhood or his imprisonment, but certainly this book, you know, it's a full life story, so you can get a deeper understanding of, you know, what actually happened to this man and what this man did.
And that is, after all, what a lot of people who are, I'll say it sort of loosely, into true crime are looking for. They often say that they're looking for the sort of reasons behind why these crimes happen, so they can find it here.
Yeah, there isn't a definitive answer. So somebody might take away from the book that, oh, it's because he abused alcohol. Somebody else might take away from the book, oh, he's repeating the abuse that he suffered from his grandfather. There isn't a definitive answer. And so because you've got the whole life story laid out in the book, people are free to make their own conclusions from that.
And that's a really great note to end it on. And we're lucky to have you. So thank you very much for joining us. I've really enjoyed it. I've been excited about meeting you.
Very welcome. I'm off now to find a Colombo raincoat and
for a small price, Mark.
I'll probably look to Miss Marple glasses and a cardigan.
I'll join you. I've got my cardi on already.
Yeah, well, if you dress
yours, if I don't find one.
Well, yeah, if you start looking like Angela Lansbury, don't expect any invitations to country house weekends. That's all I can say.
I don't get any anyway. Oh yeah, it's been really fab meeting you. Thank you for coming and joining.
Nice to talk to you, Mark. Take care.
Thanks.
Cheerio.
Have a good night.
Bye. You too. Bye now. Bye.